I thought while we were together now, we should maybe do one with the two of you. So, um, wanted to hear you. What's today's date? The 18th.
18th, March
To
18th.
hear you talk about how you met, your early life together. Start with those two, and then we can talk about.
That should fill an hour, right?
Yeah, don't fill an hour with that because I want you to talk about.
Should I talk about how we met? Should I start?
Oh, well, I think there are two different stories
Go ahead.
about how we met. One really interesting and long, and one really not so interesting and short. Go on, dear.
Okay. A guy I was friendly with, Marty Spector, is somehow a distant cousin of Lynne's, and apparently Lynne's mother was trying everything she could to get Jewish boys to come to the non-Jewish neighborhood in which they lived, mainly non-Jewish, because this 10-year-old 10th grader rather, had to be worried about, or her mother was worried about whether she would marry a Jewish boy. So she would have any Jewish boys that she knew from other parts of the world bring their friends, and they would have parties at Lynne's house. I don't know whether there was actually more than one, but I went to one with Marty Spector, who I have, in the last 3 years, or 2 or 3 years, have resumed contact with. And I met Lynne there and then sort of immediately forgot her. You know the rest of the story, Lynne?
Yeah. I had 3 male cousins. 2 of them were step cousins, and one of them was a cousin of my father's, Freddie Cohen. And I hardly knew my father's family, but my mother kept in touch with them because it was a boy who might introduce me to my future husband. So Marty brought people over, and I was immediately attracted to Bert.
This was Freddie Cohen?
No, different. There were 3 cousins. Marty was one.
Oh, Marty was one.
A step cousin. Jerry, who lived in the far northeast, was another. And Freddie Cohen,
That would have been an even
who actually was in my friend Rhoda's elementary school classes and turned out to be her accountant over many, many years. Anyway, so Marty brought Bert and a bunch of other boys. I don't remember any of the other boys. His light shone. And he promised me he would give me his central pin, his 204 class pin.
I must have been in 12th grade at the time.
You must have
Probably
been.
12A.
And that was pretty much the end of it, except that I held him in my mind.
You were smitten.
I was smitten, no question about that. I even have a picture of Bert at that age, which I can show you. The next 3 years, 11th and 12th grade, I pursued Bert in a variety of ways. And one of the ways was in 11th grade, I was working on a research paper. You did research papers in 11th and 12th grade. And I was doing a research paper on Carl Sandburg, and I absolutely had to use Penn's University of Pennsylvania Library, absolutely. And so I went down there, and always there was this possibility that I would run into Bert, hopefully would run into Bert. And sure enough, I was sitting in one of the alcoves, and I saw Bert come into, I don't know how I recognized him, but I saw him come into the library, and I jumped up, and the card catalogs used to be right between the entrance and the main reading room, and I went to the card catalogs and I pretended I was looking up a book, and Bert came past me, and I said,
weren't even on the Sandburg shelf.
Oh no, I was in I have no idea what card catalog. Anyway, he walked past me and I said, "Oh, aren't you Bert Strieb?" And he said, "Yes, but who are you?" And I reminded him who I was. And I guess we just talked. The other thing is that between my junior and sophomore year, my cousin had worked as a candy striper at Einstein Southern Hospital, and she probably had been at that party too, and she knew I was interested in Bert, and Bert was in the hospital there, and she was the candy striper, and I can't remember what else, but she told me he was in the hospital. Then in my senior year, my great aunts used to have a Hanukkah party for our family. And that was in West Oak Lane, not so close to where Bert lived, but close enough.
4 blocks away.
15th in Shelton. And this particular year, I called Marty Spector, who also lived in West Oak Lane, and I said, you know that friend of yours, Bert Strieb? I said, can we walk over and see you? Maybe you could have him. And I went with my cousin Eleanor, and Marty Spector said, oh, you don't want to, he goes to jazz clubs, and he really was not encouraging. However, he did invite Bert to come over, and you came over. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember.
You remember Eleanor?
I think I was supposed to be interested in Eleanor. I don't. I have no idea. I mean, there were these two people there.
And I remember going back to high school. I was a senior by then, and I remember talking about Bert to some other people. And by my senior year, I had a blind date to my senior prom, and his name was Harvey. And everybody in the family teases me about Harvey. And they finally Googled Harvey, and they found out he's dead.
He's out of the running.
But Harvey was the son of a friend of my mother's, and he was very kind. He took me to my senior prom, and we kind of fell in love over the telephone, because we talked every Saturday from my grandmother's house in Kensington. The thing is, it cost so much money to call from Havertown and to talk.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So I used to go to my bubbies, and that was in Philadelphia, so we would talk.
She would eat potato chips and talk.
And he
on the
was a
phone.
very nice guy, Harvey, and we really hit it off. Had a wonderful time at the prom. And my friend Francis it turns out Francis was selling liquor out of the trunk of the car, but we didn't know. Maybe Harvey knew it, but I didn't know it. And anyway, I said to Phyllis, my cousin Phyllis, not the one you just met, but different cousin, I said, I can't marry anybody till I go out with Bert Strieb. Then when I went to Penn, we would pass on the steps of Bennett Hall, and you remembered me.
By then I remember you.
And he used to tear out little articles from the New Yorker for me, and you knew I had a scholarship. You congratulated me. I don't know how you knew that, but you knew it.
Well, I remember you were coming out of or going into Bennett Hall at the same time that I was.
Well, and then we would pass on the street, yeah. And
What were we going to say?
Go ahead.
No, I knew a tiny bit about her schedule, that one day a week we were at the same place, or could be.
And then
I was beginning to show slight interest.
And then I know when we were reading L'Étranger in French, we met in the bookstore in the basement of Houston Hall, and you got a copy of it
In English.
In English, you were going to read it,
I did.
and I would see him sometimes in the lunchroom, and he would have a New Yorker article for me. And finally, I manufactured a problem. I thought Bert could help me with it. And I said, let's have lunch. And finally, sometime in December, he asked me out. In those days, you never asked a boy out. And I was busy. I had a very busy.
Well, I remember something about the lunch.
Go
Were we
ahead.
up to the lunch?
Yeah. So we had lunch in the second floor of Houston
It
Hall.
was on the second floor of Houston. I remember exactly where it was. And I remember what I had. That's all I remember about. I had a liverwurst and onion sandwich. That's all I remember.
I don't
about it.
remember that.
Well, at least you're not going to tell me I'm wrong.
And he was very helpful. I don't know what the problem was.
You were, I think, weren't you debating about whether to major in French
Or history of art, yeah, yeah.
Were you up to history of art by then?
Well,
probably came the following year.
I was actually accepted at Penn in medical technology. Well, because I thought I wanted to be a medical illustrator, and that seemed to be one way of getting there.
Just before photography.
Because no, they still use medical illustrators, and I had the scholarship, and I couldn't. Anyway, so finally in June, Bert invited me to a party, a surprise birthday party for his friend Harvey, and my
It's a
mother.
different Harvey.
Different Harvey.
Different Harvey, right?
I'm not sure I ever met your Harvey.
And
Her Harvey was a little bit.
it
This I
would
remember.
it would have been doomed
Her Harvey became a gynecologist and married one of his patients.
after he was married to somebody else.
So,
Um,
look over the merchandise.
so I went out with Bert. We went out to Harvey's party on a Friday night, and I had a date with somebody else on Saturday night. Richard Buxbaum, I remember
Did he
that.
have a derby?
No, he wasn't the one with the derby.
There was one with the derby I keep asking her about. And there was one with a velvet collar or something.
It might have been the same one.
Oh, okay.
He was from Youngstown, Ohio, of all things.
Probably owned
A Jewish guy with a derby from
He
Youngstown.
probably owned a
Ohio.
steel mill.
No.
No?
No, he owned a dry goods store. Are you kidding? No, I don't know, but I always think they all own dry goods stores. And then we had a date on Saturday, and it was an all-day date.
On Sunday, do you mean?
Sunday, yes, I'm sorry. Richard Buxbaum on Saturday night, and Bert.
Yeah, you gotta keep
So
it
we
straight.
went to the movies, we went to dinner, we went, what did we do?
Didn't you make me drive around to look at
And
an
then
old house?
we went look at old houses, and by the end of the evening, I was ready to marry Bert.
You weren't ready. You weren't.
And we looked at
No,
some.
I probably was.
We looked at some pretty
I mean,
houses.
she was pregnant by then.
Not in those
No,
days.
no, she wasn't.
No, but we looked at.
We hit it off.
We really did. We looked at some houses, and there was this little white house I loved, and then we looked at houses near where Lankenau Hospital is now, really fancy, big house. And Bert said, I mean, there was no talk about marrying. He said, if you want to live in a house like this, you'll have to find someone else.
But if we had bought one of those houses
Near Lankenau.
near Lang, they probably would have had to tear it down to
Exactly.
build Lankenau. We would have made a fortune. We could have moved
Anyway,
into Center City into a
my
place
mother
on
said,
Delancey Street.
my mother said, forget about him. He lives too far away.
That was true.
My mother was always so encouraging of me. You're too fat, you know. Is that you or me?
Probably you, but don't.
Why don't you record
Elise,
her?
could you
on-
stop for a
Why
second?
don't you record her on the phone?
No, I have
Yeah,
to
sing
because
it.
I'm.
This would give you allow me to blow my.
So
Don't touch the
let
table.
me just think it through. Oh, I know. So the next day, are you on? Bert went home. Well, you went home that night. Oh, my mother used to be very encouraging. Really, I mean,
She's
she
been
had
sarcastic.
no confidence in me. I was too smart. Men don't like smart women, so you know. But I was too fat. But have some ice cream with me. And Bert, he wouldn't be interested in me because he lives too far away.
Only the latter was true.
And when I lived in England, she was upset because she said, how do you know he's going to be here for you when you get back? You're not that thin.
That was a theme of her life.
It really was. After that date, what did you do? You went home and told your mother?
That I met the one. This is the story. And my mother said, what one? Not which one, but what one?
Or one what?
One what? And I explained somebody that I'm going to marry. And she said, who's that? And then Lynn came for dinner at some point. It was the first time I think she had met my parents. And I think there were iced tea glasses or iced tea spoons or something. Right. And my brother Ronnie, who was, I guess Ronnie was 10 years younger than me or something. So he was just a little kid. He said, what are these for? You weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to be something we used all the time. Right. Iced teaspoons.
Well, the first time I was supposed to meet your mother, it was after we went to Don and Barbara's house.
Oh.
And we stopped over and she was asleep on the sofa. And she said, I'm sorry, I can't meet anybody now.
And you met my Aunt Sarah, who thought you had a big ass. She got right to the...
Why are you interested in her? She is.
She got right...
Oh,
she didn't
God.
mess around.
Anyway,
No.
we got engaged at Passover.
That's right. It was the Seder at my parents' house, I guess. And then I went through a lot... I should say I went through a lot of turmoil about an engagement ring, which apparently was a big thing at the time, promoted by the people who dug up diamonds.
De Beers Diamond Company.
Because apparently diamonds aren't that rare, but if you keep them out of the market, the price goes up. And if you convince enough people that they should have diamonds, then they want diamonds. So I went through agony trying to decide whether to get her a ring, and I think my Aunt Sarah helped me. She had a jeweler, and I went to that jeweler and got some ring or something. But your mother didn't think it was big enough, or
Me?
No, your mother. I said no, not
Not
you.
Lee's mother.
Not Lee's mother. Your mother. Somebody didn't think it was
Really?
big enough. I think I heard that.
Oh, jeez. But you almost got arrested. You were walking. You went for a walk. You were so upset. You went out for a walk in Cheltenham Township.
Yeah.
And the police stopped you.
Yeah. Well, I may have been just trying to get exercise. I'm not sure, but no, I was very upset about the whole thing. About being pressured into this. I mean, you felt it was necessary.
I wanted a ring.
There were. I mean, there was this whole thing at Penn with all these women walking around flashing their rings in people's eyes. It was disgusting. And not only that, but after we were married, I think it was after we were married, maybe we were still going.
It was after
we went to a sorority. I think it was a sorority.
Oh.
It was some really weird ceremony at the Broadwood Hotel, which was at Broad and Wood Street. And maybe your mother can explain what that was about, because I've never been able to figure it out.
I don't remember.
It was like a bunch of virgins. It was hundreds of virgins. Were people who were pretending to be virgin. It was the most absurd thing. But it sort of went with the ring. And eventually, what'd you do? You lost the ring, or
no,
the ring
was
stolen?
Kid Donald Newsom, I think.
Stole it.
One of the kids who lived, I think, around the corner was gone.
Stole it. But I hope he got a good price for it.
Well, it had a crack in it.
Oh, okay. Well,
I hit it on the door.
Oh, you broke it. It's a diamond that broke that easily?
Of course.
Okay, it was a cheap diamond.
Wasn't it was a...
It used all my bar mitzvah money.
Is that true?
I think so.
I'm sorry.
But, however, I mean, one thing that we did,
I'm sorry.
we talked about buying a painting or something, I think, instead of that. And so Lynn made a copy, which is still hung in my office here, of a famous Ben Shahn thing of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And she did a little block by block
I grafted.
copy thing.
Yeah.
But then we went to, I guess it was must have been after we were married.
It was the downtown gallery.
We went to a gallery in New York and asked to see Ben Shahn stuff. And they pulled drawers open and they had all this Ben Shahn stuff. And I could have gotten her something like that instead of the ring, which would probably,
worth more money now.
Newsom, whatever the kid's name is, probably would not have been the slightest bit interested.
So maybe jump forward. If you want to talk about your wedding, do that. But talk about, just early married life together and any funny stories.
I'd like to talk about our wedding a little bit. We had...
Poor guy. He really got roped into it.
We had 2 rabbis at the wedding because my parents were a big deal in the synagogue, but it was taking place at Lynn's mother's synagogue, or I guess your synagogue that you weren't really members of, but somehow because the woman was supposed to be in charge or something of the wedding, it was there. So that rabbi, you remember that rabbi's name? I don't remember.
Winnick.
Okay. Who I guess signed they probably both signed the thing. If you have 2 rabbis, they each sign it, right? Probably. But we don't know where the thing is that they signed. Lynn cried when we had many hundreds of people there. Lynn cried when something happened up on the platform. I think the fact that this thing was going on, that her long effort had been a success. And I don't remember much more, but what we had were 2 classes of people. We had the people who were only invited to the cocktail thing, and who, if they were smart, they drank a lot. And then there were the people who were invited to stay for dinner, who, if they were smart, probably would have left before the dinner. I guess there was dancing, and I don't know whether people did that thing where, isn't there something where you bang on the glasses and you're supposed to kiss? I don't know whether either of us knew anything about that. I certainly didn't. Was that going on?
I don't
It may have been going on and we didn't have any idea that it was happening. Our grandchildren are now all older than we were when we got married, considerably older by now than we were when we got married.
You were how old?
And they think it's absurd. It was absurd.
How old were you?
I was, I guess I had just turned 26,
No.
21 rather.
Yeah. And I had just turned 20. It was 2 weeks after my 21st birthday.
And I had just graduated college, and Lynn was going into her junior year. I was going into graduate school.
So you asked, so how did we support ourselves? That's a really, because I had a scholarship, and you had
I had an $1,800 assistantship, and then I did a lot of tutoring.
For how much an hour?
$5 an hour it was.
Was that a lot at the time?
I doubt it. We'll have to ask Jay.
But we were supplemented by
the fact that her grandmother owned
stuff
the
from
grocery
my
store.
grandmother's grocery store.
You would come and there'd be stuff on the doorstep.
It's not when we lived down there.
Not when we lived in town. We lived at 24th and Spruce, next to what turned out to be the Weiss's house. And we lived there, I think, for 3 years. But during the 3rd year, my Aunt Sarah, I think, of the fat ass reputation, had given us, I guess had given us money, or me money, or something. We went on a 7-week trip across the country. We rented a car from Lynn's cousin, Burton, who was doing a car rental thing.
He owned budget rental car franchise.
So we went across the country, and I think their office was a block from here.
Right.
We went across the country.
Where that
We could
apartment
tell you about that trip if you cared. But when we got back, our apartment was on the 3rd floor. When we got back, there was a hole in the hall of our apartment that you had to walk through. It went all the way down to the basement, straight down to the basement. And the owners had decided to do there were new owners, and they had decided they were going to move in there, and they were going to renovate it. Nobody ever said anything to us, and we had to move in with my parents for probably a couple of months,
Yeah,
which our marriage survived that.
I started teaching I was a long-term substitute teacher that fall, and we were living with Bert's parents.
On Mountain Avenue?
No, it was on it was
No,
it was on
7th
7th Street. On 7th
Harry
Street.
had to move back into the city.
Because he was living illegally outside the city. This is,
And I had a jar full of silver dollars that I'd been collecting since I
I
was
thought just dimes or
a
something.
baby. No, there were two things. And then there was a vodka bottle filled with dimes. And of course, work person had gone through the apartment, and those silver dollars were gone.
How
And
about the dimes?
and the dimes were gone too, but the silver dollars
I didn't realize
were
they
silver. And I mean, they must have been worth thousands of dollars, truly. They were gifts every year I would get silver dollars. Anyway.
And we lived there for about 3 years. We stayed with my parents,
4 years.
and it's sort of amazing that our marriage lasted, because Lynn almost drove my father crazy with leaving lights on wherever she went. There were lights. You could track her motion. It was like the spore that an animal leaves. And at that time, you had to pay for, well, even now, I guess, you have to pay for electricity. She was driving my father completely bonkers, and I should have taken the warning, because it still drives me bonkers.
Well, anyway, we lived 24th and Spruce, and not many, nowadays lots of students live in town, but in those days there were very few people who walked across the Walnut Street Bridge. It was exhilarating, actually, to do that when you left in the morning and when you came back, occasionally over this South Street Bridge, but mostly over the Walnut Street Bridge.
There was at least one other student who lived in town, and he wasn't a Penn student. He lived right under us.
He went to Curtis.
He went to Curtis, and he played the French horn, I think. Very bad, really badly. I don't know how he ever got into Curtis. And he would play it at like 3 in the afternoon.
Just
practice
nap
when we were
time.
taking naps.
Just our nap
It-
time.
he
And
had a
then my
weird-
mother would call.
It was terrible.
That was when we started taking the phone off the hook,
Which we continued to
which
do.
we continued to do, only there are no
There are no-
phones with hooks
There are
anymore.
no hooks, but we still
turn the
same
phone
thing.
off.
And well, the other thing that happened there, we were living on the 3rd floor in this. It was a converted house, and there was somebody on the 1st floor, a guy in the front of on the 1st floor, who would smoke in bed. And I think at least twice, we came downstairs and went outside in the morning, and there was a mattress with a big hole burned in it. We could be dead by now because of this guy.
There was that. There was Ting. That was the
That was the French horn.
Ting was the French horn player,
Yeah, I
and he
didn't know.
also played the banjo. And that's what he really liked to do.
He was a good banjo
And he
player.
used to perform. There was a bar that had country and
I
western
didn't know
music, and he used to perform there. But then right underneath us, there was a woman.
Who performed on the broom handle.
You know, I used to stay up really late all night. Bert would go to bed, and I wasn't aware, but I used to sit in the kitchen. There was the living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, and the stairs were in between the bathroom and the bedroom. And I would sit in the kitchen, and of course I would move the chair out when I woke up, when I had to get up. And of course, the sound of that chair grating across the floor in the middle of the night must have driven that poor woman crazy. So she would take a broom and hit the ceiling with it.
I'm not sure I ever saw the woman.
But then there was something else. The heat. She would turn the thermostat in the hall all the way up.
We had no
She was
control.
freezing, and we had no control over it. And we would write notes to her, and we would say, please put on, you can only take off so much, and you're down to your skin, but you can at least put on clothes if you're cold. It turned out that she had radiators that were turned off. And, oh, do you remember that? No.
She was
Okay.
heating the apartment from the hallway or something.
Right. Right.
And there were people across the hall. The guy, I think,
street,
worked
across the
the street, rather. The guy, I think, was a designer or something who worked in New York. And
They had worked at Disney.
yeah, and their name was Knitsch.
Knitsch.
I don't remember anything more about it. She was like a large blonde woman, wasn't she? I don't remember anything more than that.
And one day we were in New York City on a bus. We got off the bus,
And
and
there she was.
he was.
He
He was on the same bus that we were.
How do you
Very
like that?
strange.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Who else was around there? At the end of the street, where there's a very nice
right.
park now, it was a terminal for trucks, delivery, not little delivery trucks, but the trucks that were delivering the big stuff, the kind that wind up on those container ships. That was at the end of our street,
And
like a half a block
and
away.
there were freight tracks, which are still in use now.
Yeah, and
Along the river, kind of.
Right along the river,
And
right where the Schuylkill Trail is now.
after we were gone, they converted that to a park, which for a while was called Judy Garland Park, because it was a big hangout for gays,
It was a
pickup place.
assignation.
And there were, this is after we were gone, there were signs, traffic signs all over the place that you could only go around the block once after midnight or something, because people were going around looking for picks up. That was after our time.
It's so changed over there now.
Yeah. Did you guys cook at that point?
I did.
I did.
Well, for one thing, we invited Marty Spector and his wife over, and we often invited people over. Usually just another couple. Occasionally we had a party, but we invited Marty and Cindy over, and I remember that meal because every course had nuts in it, and she turned out was allergic to nuts, so I had to make her tuna salad.
Meanwhile, 60-some years later, she's dying of other stuff.
Anyway,
I think she was a bad bet to begin with.
they've been married for 60-some years.
Well, that's true, but I think she's been ill the whole time.
Okay, anyway, one of the more memorable meals I made for dessert, I was going to make. Do you remember that?
I remember hearing about it. I'm not sure I ever saw
I
it.
don't think you were there. I was going to make floss. It was ice cream in a bowl. And then it had...
Sorry, say again, you were going to make what?
It was, well, the dessert was going to have ice cream in a bowl.
Spun sugar.
And I was going to make sponge sugar and roll it, and it was going to be like a nest on top. So the first direction for the sponge sugar was grease a broomstick handle. Grease a broomstick. And I tried to make that damn candy floss. And what you do is you make sugar syrup, and then you go like this back and forth. And then it's supposed to stay soft enough. Are you kidding?
He did it the wrong temperature.
Yes, I did, and I didn't have a thermometer. Anyway, I broke more glasses in that sink. How many?
I seem to remember we had been given about 3 dozen glasses for showers and stuff, and within probably a month, every single one of them was broken. The sink was only about.
It was a very shallow sink,
So
but that was only part of the reason. Oh God. Anyway, it was.
The other thing that we got was, we may have even used it at that time. There was something where you heated up oil or something, and it was like a pot. It was a Swiss thing. Fondue pot, and you heat up oil or cheese or something in that. It was a really bad idea that was popular in the 60s.
Bell and Ann still do it.
They said, well, it's probably still a bad idea.
I mean, they do it a lot. They do raclette, which is meat in oil, and they do cheese fondue.
So
I don't get it.
Our time is valuable.
Okay, sorry.
That's fine.
Well, so those
This is the
early,
real us, though.
No, it is. It's great. It's really good.
those
It's very
early
good.
days, you know, we spent a lot of time going to concerts.
Uh-huh.
Bert really introduced me to a lot of cultural events that I don't think if I had married Harvey, I would. But we went to a lot of modern music concerts.
Penn at that time had a lot of. The only thing they had was some interesting music. The music department was terrible, but they did have.
They really did. But that's when Rockburg came.
Yeah, I guess
Started getting
there
more
was
interesting.
there was a string quartet in residence, so we heard like Bartok quartets and
They
Beethoven
had a composer
quartets.
in residence.
Yeah, Stockhausen, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen was in residence for at least a year there when he
It was exciting.
That's great.
And theater, there used to be, Spalding Gray used to come to the Christian Association. That's where they performed.
Oh, right.
And also movies. There was a series at the
Christian Association.
at the Franklin Institute. That's where we saw Joan of Arc.
Right.
What was
Dreyer.
Dreyer. So what was?
What was what?
It was just, for me, it was just a big cultural
No, we really took
awakening.
much more advantage of living in town than we do now. Much more.
Mm-hmm.
Now we walk across to the drugstore.
And that's
to a restaurant or something.
That's when I met a number of friends I still have, Vicky, Joy. Although Joy was a sorority girl.
Joy was probably at that thing at the Broadwood Hotel. That's my theory. She may have been saying, "Oh, I'll tell you."
Yeah.
Joy.
She was
the
active.
Evidence that she was almost certainly there is that if you went to a speaker at Penn, whatever was, it could be a radical political speaker, although there were none. If you went to a speaker at Penn, when they announced the speaker, they would announce the name of the speaker.
It was in Houston Hall in a room men were only allowed to go into.
No,
except for the speaker.
No, I remember it being in other places too. They'd announce the speaker in the newspaper or something, and then they would tell you who the pourers are, and there'd be two. They were always women, unless it was somebody in drag who would be sitting at the ends of this table, and in between. I don't think there was a samovar there. I think that would have been too exotic.
There was.
But there would be a coffee pot and tea,
coffee.
hot water. And these people would get you your tea. It was like you couldn't pour the water for your tea, but it was considered an honor to do that.
They would announce the pourers.
And my bet, has Joy confessed to being one of them?
No, it was definitely, I remember seeing her name.
See that? So I think she was at the Broadwood Hotel too.
She was in a sorority, and she was a pourer. But there were rooms at Penn that women were not allowed to go into, and I graduated from the College for Women. It was a separate institution.
However, she never had a female teacher.
Why one?
It was the College for Female Students, but it was different times.
Anyway, we, as far as marriage, cooking, I did most of the cooking. You didn't do much
No, I
cooking
didn't.
at all.
Give me one sec.
Yeah.
See about zooming in. Okay, go ahead.
I did most of the cooking. Bert did the laundry, but he had an ulterior motive for doing the laundry.
I guess I didn't really, but I understand what you mean.
We did not have a washer and dryer in our apartment.
We didn't even have a clothesline or a rack. What the ulterior motive that your mother, I think I'm right about this, was that the laundromat was a block or so away, and then I guess I could go to the park afterwards or something.
Fiddler Square.
The Fiddler Square afterwards, and there was a chance of seeing Esther Crystal there with Julie, who was a little baby at the time.
They lived the Crystals lived in the 2300 block of Spruce Street, and we didn't know them, and we had not met them, but they looked so interesting. And if you looked in their window, there was a loom,
She
and
looked
there
in
were.
all the windows.
I like to look in the window. There was a loom, and there were books, and then this beautiful woman with pitch black hair,
Which is now pitch white.
would come out with this little curly-haired 2-year-old, and I would think someday I'm going to know that person.
And we do.
and we do.
She was called my girlfriend.
We called her his girlfriend. He would go on Sunday to see his girlfriend in the park.
So how did you end up moving from downtown? What?
Well, they made a hole through our.
That was not.
I know
We
that.
came back and the hole was fixed.
Yeah.
We
No,
came
but they
back.
essentially threw us out
Yeah.
because they were taking over the whole house.
Right, and we were paying very little.
And the guy you were paying $70 a month, and the guy who was setting the place on fire had failed to succeed.
Mrs. Tobias,
That was the name, Mrs. Tobias.
So,
So
I was pregnant. I had been teaching at Dunbar that year, and that's when we moved to Porter Street in Mount Airy.
And then Rhoda and Larry moved in under us. Was Jenny born
A
yet?
year later, right when Jenny was born, that was a year later. So on Porter Street, we lived on the second floor. We had a small kitchen you couldn't eat in. We had a large living room with a table at the end. Middle room, that was your room. And then our large bedroom was in the back. And you could get there either through the apartment or in the hall. And when we first moved in, I was sitting on the floor cutting out fabric. I used to sew my own clothes in those days. And, oh my God, I started getting bitten and I just couldn't imagine what was going on. And somebody said maybe there's an animal that has fleas. And I had no idea that cats could have fleas. I only thought dogs could have fleas.
Cats can have fleas.
And Mrs. Ridenour's cat had fleas. Not only that, but Mrs. Ridenour had a friend, Mr. Drake, was that his name?
Oh, I forgot that.
Mr. Drake. And he used to like to come to the porch roof on the second floor and peek into our apartment. He was so creepy. And Mr. Drake used to be her, I don't know, helper, handyman, something.
Boyfriend,
What?
Boyfriend.
Maybe boyfriend. And she died shortly after we moved in.
But the fleas lived on.
No, they got rid of the fleas. But we got to buy that carved bench for $5. We paid for that carved bench. That I have pictures of it that we sold for, I don't know, $600 or something. The church bench. And then after that, Rhoda and Larry moved in to the first floor and had Jenny.
They were waiting for the fleas to be gone.
Right. And you were born in December, and that's when Dad started really cooking, right? And I remember the first meal you made when I came back from the hospital. It was chicken livers. And he said, how do you get this all to come out at the same time? We were looking at paintings. We were looking to buy some paintings, or we bought some paintings from Louise, and my mother said, imagine that. They don't have any rugs on the floor, but they're buying paintings.
And she's fat.
And besides, you're too fat. Oh, God. But she did used to leave lamb chops, packages of lamb chops on the steps for Bert.
Not for you.
Not for me.
She would leave, wasn't she leaving
Boneless,
shad?
yeah, boneless shad.
That was for
That
you.
is more expensive even than lamb chops. So at that point, I would say things got really equal. I mean,
another thing that happened though, when it was Lee. When Lee was in the high chair, he would eat but drop food on the floor. We had a mouse that would come out when you were still in the chair and we were still having dinner. It would eat the food that you had dropped. It knew.
That mouse was a very happy mouse. Those were the years when Julia Child was on TV.
Yeah, we got a bat, and we had a bat in the middle in your bedroom.
That was when Soul
too.
was born.
I remember that.
Bert went naked into your room to get you out of there. I didn't follow him, but I understand he was holding one hand here and flailing, and then holding you and flailing. And Saul was in a crib right next to our bed. He was just born. And the next morning, you left the window open and the bat was gone.
It knew to get out. And there were, well, I don't know about you, but we have pictures of Larry Konefsky started taking pictures. I think we hired him to do portraits of you guys to give to parents.
Well, the one of Lou was taken before they lived there.
Okay, but there's a picture of, I think, Saul playing in the mud on our in our walkway. I think we used to call that Muddy Buddy.
Muddy Buddy.
The picture, but it was Saul, and
well, we used to, we were pretty close with Rhoda and Larry. We spent a lot of time.
You didn't know them before they moved in, or you did?
Yeah.
I sort of vaguely knew Rhoda, and the Grossmans lived down the street. The other thing down the street was, you know what I'm going to talk about?
No.
Down the street
Yeah.
was a market. What was the name of the market? It was
Glen
Market,
Food Market.
almost Green Street and Horder. And we did, I think, most of our shopping. Most of the time we didn't have a car. Maybe after Warner, we had a car, I don't know. We really didn't use a car much if we had one. And we would shop down there. It was a fine market and stuff. And we used to get ducks down there and cook the ducks. But we realized that and the ducks were like 19 cents
really
a
cheap.
pound. And we realized that at some point that they were one-legged ducks. So I think what used to happen, my theory is, and I think you probably agree with it, that when they slaughtered the ducks, what they would do is hang the duck up by a leg, and if the leg came off, they would throw it in that pile, the duck in that pile, and that they would sell them to the Glen Market. So every time now we buy, well, it hasn't happened in a long time, we haven't bought anything in a long time, but if you buy something that doesn't quite work or that's missing a part or something, we call it a one-legged duck. And when we're dead, nobody's going to understand. Unless somebody watches this, nobody is going to understand what we're talking about.
Right, that's why this is important. So it's 8 minutes after now.
Okay.
But so I don't. So this is good. I'm just trying to think in a few minutes left. I mean, think about what wisdom you want to impart.
Well, when I started working at LaSalle, this isn't wisdom. When I started
And
working,
let me say one more thing. We'll do more. I mean, I feel like I've started all these processes of talking to each of you about your childhood and stuff. So there's lots more to do. But it's fun to do a bunch of this together. So go ahead.
when I started teaching at LaSalle,
We were
which I can talk about when we talk about my education or lack thereof, and I would take the 23 trolley, I guess, home up Germantown Avenue after getting over from LaSalle, and Mom would walk up with you guys in a stroller or a carriage.
Well, he used to walk.
Oh yeah, he used to walk all the way up to Germantown Avenue to meet me, and there was an old-fashioned A&P there with stuff that you had to get down with one of those grabber things. I'm pretty sure they had one.
Yeah.
But, it had wooden counters and clerks there that served you and stuff like that. Right, it was right at the end of Horder Street.
It was really old.
It was an old-fashioned A&P. I guess we bought stuff there as well as at the Glen Market. What else was going on that street? Oh, somebody famous lived across the street. Lawyer, or
The Countrymans.
The Countrymans.
Joan was wheeling Matthew the same time that I was wheeling
She was
you.
across the street at the time.
They lived a little slightly further up, but yeah, we used to see them walking. The kid, Joan.
How did you choose to live in that neighborhood?
I had a professor, John Benton of blessed memory. He was the best teacher I ever had. I had him as an undergraduate, medieval history, and then when I was in graduate school, I took a course with him, medieval French history. Now, you know my dedication if I went to a class at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, a 2-hour class, or was it 3 hours?
We used to go out for dinner afterwards
And then we'd
with
go
those
out for
obnoxious
dinner
people.
But John Benton was a Quaker. His beautiful wife, Elspeth, they lived on Hansbury Street in Germantown. And that was, he was the professor who invited us to his house, which influenced you, I think. And he lived in Germantown.
But that doesn't explain why we lived in Mount Airy.
It's sort of right on the border
that was,
there, right?
but to me that was Germantown. I mean,
Okay.
yeah. And
We wanted to be in an integrated.
integrated because it was integrated, and people were active in the schools. His kids went to GFS, but that was okay because he was a Quaker.
Real Quaker.
Real Quaker. Yeah. I mean, we didn't look.
You were teaching at the time, right? You had started teaching.
I taught at Dunbar.
Right. Okay, that was real
The
teaching.
year that we lived with your parents, and then I became pregnant, and then we moved to Order Street.
One of her pregnancy, your first pregnancy, ended in a miscarriage.
Well,
You had
that was, yeah.
in a miscarriage.
Yeah.
Which you recovered from to have Liddy.
And I should say that I was in graduate school in history of art before I taught at Dunbar, and I was pretty disillusioned at that point. And let's see, I had 2 more courses when I dropped out to teach, and I did take 1 more course when you were little, when you and Saul were little, but I never
Didn't finish it.
never.
I was not real encouraging for you.
No, you weren't.
No, it was awful.
We did have a woman who cleaned for us. That was a point of contention. And
Susie,
yeah.
she had worked for my mother.
She had worked for Dora, Bert's mother.
And you were going out to teach, and I would race ahead of this woman. Like I was inches ahead of her. And that kept us from having somebody clean for us for many years. It was just an awful experience having to I mean, if the woman was there for 3 hours, I'd spend 2 hours and 45 minutes racing ahead of her.
Susie was really interesting because she was almost blind. She was a preacher, and she used to go into prisons, I think, and preach to prisoners. She was an interesting, very skinny lady.
And then you moved.
From Horder Street,
The schoolhouse.
when Saul was a year old, basically, we moved to Schoolhouse Lane. But well, I just, Bert used to take care of the kids a lot. I mean, it was, I was not so happy being home.
Well, you were working,
I wasn't working then.
Oh, okay.
And
So
Judy Hill, that's when I became friends with. I met her when I was pregnant. We were both pregnant.
We were in the same birth class.
And we really became good friends. And I used to walk up to Allen's Lane where she lived. We would sit there and eat Sara Lee banana cakes, little bit by little bit.
Making your mother jealous.
We'd eat all there was of it. And okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't know exactly where to. I mean, we probably have to stop pretty soon, but.
Well, it was also the time when the women's movement was just starting, and Betty Friedan had written her book, and
what was the impact? I mean, what?
When were you in a women's group? Is it that time or later?
It had to have been later, but there was this woman, Marion Medlitz. There's a whole movie about her. Have you seen it? Well, it's all right, that's a whole other thing. But she was a communist, and I don't know what else to say. She and her husband, she lived in Germantown. She had a kid who was a little bit older than you. And we would get together, and I remember walking down Germantown Avenue. She was African American, and we were talking about whether, I think it was then, there was a big women's conference that was going to happen, and whether to go. I just remember talking about it, and I certainly read, what was it called? I don't even remember what it was called, her book, but I read that, and it very much appealed to me, all of that. And plus, Louise and I were friends, and so, okay.
Marion was married to a guy named Mickey Medelitz, who was sort of very Jewish. He had characteristic accent, what do you call a characteristic New York accent? I don't know if he was from New York or not, but he taught at Douglas School, where Betsy Weiss wound up teaching. He taught for a long time. I think was a highly respected teacher. He was
not by his colleagues, but by the neighborhood.
He
used to play Frederick Douglass in the yearly.
He was a little hard to take. But Marion, when they divorced and she married some other guy,
Stotesbury,
yeah, who was very rich. The movie is about the fact that Marion began to record on, I guess, videotape, all the news programs. So she
daily local news.
So she had an enormous library of news stuff. I mean, it was sort of nutty, but the movie's largely about that collection, about her doing that collection.
And what they did with it.
And what's the kid's name?
Michael.
And what's he do?
I don't know what he does. Doesn't have to do anything. She bought Apple stock when it first came out, and she ended up her life living at the Barclay Hotel, and every night she'd go to Park and have a martini and dinner. And she married this, not only did she marry this extremely wealthy guy, white guy, but she also was an early investor in, anyway, this movie is worth seeing, and I'll give you the information.
Yeah. Good. Well, we should break here. Yeah. That was.
I'm going to go and make food for you.
I think that was very good. And so we have many loose ends. We should clean up, but
I'll clean up.
But
you pack.
Hi.
we have an hour.
Okay.
Less
than an hour. I just thought we'll do more. We can do more interviews figuring out that Skype setup, but not Skype. You know what I mean, the Zoom setup. But
Those are Lee's glasses. You're wearing your blue glasses.
Where are my glasses?
Your blue glasses. You get new glasses soon?
Me?
Yeah.
No. Not till these break.
all right. Okay, so try not to bang
So
into.
how do my eyes look?
Uh,
Can you see them, or is the light in the?
there's a little bit of shadow.
There's always shadow.
It's really hard.
Is that better?
How about my eyes? I can take my glasses off.
No, don't take your glasses off.
No, I wear them all the time. Why would I take
I'm
them off?
not. What's that have to do with my glasses?
No.
Yeah, but both of you. I mean, so there's a little bit of shadow for both. Let me just do two things quick. So with
I
this.
meant to put on lipstick.
No, you're good.
Why not?
We want you just the way you look when you get out of bed.
I'll be right back. Get me my purse since you're walking around.
And turn off the kitchen light. Watch
That's
out,
not my purse.
watch out for the wires.
Yeah.
Thanks, hon.
Everybody watch out for wires.
Thank you.
Jen, is hair very high here?
Yes, it's in a big knot.
Oh,
Okay, so you guys talk,
about what?
just make noise.
Hello, 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 hello.
Testing 1, 2, 3. 7 years ago. I have a dream that someday
This will all be
this will all
over.
be over. If not, someday I'll be all over. I don't know which will come first. We're being confronted by all this apparatus.
Do I look very much lower because I could be sitting on a higher chair?
Sit on
You
my
do
lap.
look lower.
Sit on my
Well,
lap.
I'm sitting on a damn.
You want to sit on a pillow?
3
You can
pillows.
sit in a higher chair if you want, but
Give her 3 pillows. I could have brought up the foam pad.
this may be weird, but
Dan never used the foam pad for me.
You mean when you had to
don't fall off.
put one foot in front of the other?
Yeah.
There you go, a little tone. Okay,
Yeah.
slide into him a little more.
I shouldn't move closer to her.
No, you just
Whatever.
stay where you are.
All right,
I'm going to slide right off this.
I can get you other stuff.
Oh, there are 2 of them. Oh. Just a minute. Don't lose them.
Thank you very much.
What's that?
It's a earbud.
All right, so I shouldn't touch the table much. Hi.